Well, I've had the privilege of giving 2 presentations today. So for the Bible study, I talked about learning lessons from study, how we can use the ability to study to learn a lot in life. Well, this presentation in the sermon time is about learning lessons from experience. Learning lessons from experience. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. We talk here about learning in life. We like to learn lessons. And a couple of words I'm going to use today are success and failure, or success and mistakes. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit. I'm going to give maybe 4 different concepts, and just tell you the order I'm going to go in those concepts are going to be success, failure, failure, success. You'll see what I mean when I give the exact details. But I'm going to start with success. I'm going to end with success because we want to learn from our successes, but it's also good that we learn from our failures as well. And I'll be talking about that. But 1 Corinthians 13, beginning verse 11, reminds us that life is a process, a maturing process. We all mature. We need to learn from life. And by the way, when we talk about learning through study or experience, experience is the most effective teacher, and that is the most powerful teacher. But I don't recommend learning from experience. I recommend you learn as much as you can through study, that you learn as much as you can from other people, from watching other people. There will be there'll be a lot of things we can learn by watching others, but there will be some things we have to learn from experience. So those experiences could be bad, but we can make them good. We can turn the lemons into lemonade. But see, in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11, Paul wrote, "When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things." So when he became an adult, he grew up. He learned. That's what life is. Life is a learning experience. It's a maturing experience. That's what it's supposed to be. One of my favorite expressions when I watch young people, I'll say, there that person goes again, acting like a 12-year-old. And I'm not meaning it condescending. I expect 12-year-olds to act like 12-year-olds. Sometimes they'll act like 9-year-olds. Sometimes they'll act like 15-year-olds, in the ballpark. But kids have got to act like kids. That's what they do. And then sometimes you see 80-year-olds act like 80-year-olds. And sometimes you watch 90-year-olds act like 90-year-olds. And it's just, the thing is, this is what we do. We grow through life. We learn through life. And isn't it great that we're not defined by our weakest moment in life? Isn't it great that we're not defined by our mistakes in life? We can learn from those mistakes. We can learn from those experiences. So I told you we're going to talk about success, failure, failure, success. Here's what I mean by that. The first point I want to tell you is learn from the success of other people. Learn from the success of other people. When you watch good examples, you want to learn from that. As you turn to Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, I'm going to refer to a couple scriptures on the handout, and you can check them later, and those of you at home can hear and you can write them down. As you're turning to Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, Hebrews 5, verse 8, I don't know what I said, but it should be 5:8. Consider Romans 1:20. Write down Romans 1:20, because it says in Romans 1:20, the invisible things of God are clearly seen by the things that are made. And the point I want you to consider from Romans 1:20 is, let's learn from God's successful creation. This point is learning from the success of others. David, it says in the book of Psalms, sat out watching his sheep, and he started looking at the stars in heaven, looking at the sky in heaven, and he's, what is man that you are mindful of him? What are some of the things that make you think about to make you marvel? Here's a couple for me. Hydraulics. Hydraulics just make me marvel. When I watch hydraulics at work, who came up with that? I know some might think they're greater creations than that. I am just so impressed with hydraulics, and man came up with that. Then how did Al Gore, how did he invent the internet? I don't know. I'm making a little shot at Al Gore. Please excuse me, Mr. Gore, if you're listening. But the internet's an amazing thing to me. To watch how they've created a device, these phones, that they can track everywhere I go. They can listen to everything I say, and how they do it, they made it so useful for me. It is so useful for me that if I want to block them out, I have to take the battery out of it. I can't just turn it off. I have to take the battery out of it. But who made this device? I mean, it's just amazing what people have done. But more importantly than the devices, a lot of times like I'm driving, it's easy to do while you're driving. I'll just start looking at how my hand works. Just how it's hard to look at my knee when I'm driving or my foot, but I can look at my hand and you say, well, you're a strange man, Dave Havir. Of course I am. I'm looking at how my hand works. It's like, look at how that works. I guess, evolutionists, scientists would say, that's why you can't always follow the science. Scientists would say that I evolved. My friends, I don't have enough faith to think that I evolved. I think it takes more faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe in creation. And I believe in creation. But it's just amazing what we can do. You can think back when we were athletic, and now we're old, and some of the things we can do. My wife likes to look at when we watch a gymnast, usually these gymnastic girls, but the guys too, and they'll do these flips on the floor exercise. They'll flip around, do all these things, and my wife will say, one of her favorite lines is, how does she make her body do that? How can a person do that? It's just amazing. It's just amazing about things. So the creation, you look at creation, another scripture to write down is John 16:21. John 16:21 talks about childbirth. And we think of so much from childbirth. We learn so much. I consider this success of childbirth. And even some of the issues people have about science, again, about gender and etc. Just look at the creation. We can learn so much just from the success of the creation. Man and woman getting married, man and woman having babies. It's just wonderful. Another scripture to write down is 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 7 and 8. 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 7 and 8 talks about the Apostle Paul treated the congregation like he was a mother. Now, I hope you can say, Dave, when you deal with us, you're kind of like a nice mother. You're a good mother. I think that's an honor. I thought the world of my mother, okay? I thought the world of my mother. So if I picked up some of the nurturing traits of my mother, I would be honored to do that. I'd be honored to do that. When I see the great qualities of the women around who are great at nurturing people, if I can pick some of that up, I would be honored by that. But see, Hebrews 5, verse 8 talks about probably the greatest success story of all. Hebrews 5, verse 8 says, though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. So if we're talking about learning from experience, I can look at the example of the Son of God, and I can look at that example, and you're in my role model, and we can learn from that experience. He showed us that we should be obedient. So again, we can learn from the success of others. So look around and you see people who are successful, whether it be in education, whether it be in business, whatever it is, we can learn from the experience of others. The second point is learn from the mistakes and the sins of other people. If you're going to have failure, we want to learn from the failures of other people. Turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 6 through 11. As you turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 6 through 11, let's think of some examples of great mistakes in life. Have you learned from the example of Adam and Eve? What did you learn from the example of Adam and Eve back in Genesis chapter 3? What did you learn from the example of Adam and Eve? Well, you learned the fact that God made them, and God gave them instructions, and God's instructions were to help them, and when they didn't do the right thing, they suffered consequences. So what did I learn from that? What did I learn from the mistakes of Adam and Eve? That God gives me instructions to help me. He gives instructions to bless me. If I don't follow those things, I may suffer consequences. So I know He's a giving God. Again, I like to say this regularly. In the garden, He said you can have this tree and 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 this tree. I view God as a God of yes. God is a God of yes. And that's when some religions, or some people look back at their religions and they think about some of the no's. And maybe some of the people who are, the men and women who are conducting the religion focused on the no's and misapplied the no's. But God is a God of yes. But when God says no, he meant no. And so we as parents want to be yes kind of parents, but we have to have no's, and there have to be consequences. As pastors and teachers, we want to be yes kind of people. Yes, you can do that. Yes, try that. You can try it. But you know, you really can't do that one. Because if you do that one, that's not good. And we try to help people understand that way. Another one, while you're turning to 1 Corinthians 10, you're there. But there's a scripture in Genesis chapter 9 that Noah got drunk. Great Noah, from the book of Hebrews 11, got drunk. Now, should we then say, well, that means we have one mulligan. We can get drunk one time in our life. We can be like Noah. I mean, maybe he got drunk more than that, but we know of one time he got drunk. So does that mean we're free to have a mulligan to get drunk one time? No, it doesn't mean that at all. But I can learn from the fact that Noah made mistakes and Noah was forgiven. And that tells me that I look at all of you, and I know a lot of your mistakes because you tell me, and we don't talk about it to everybody. But I know a lot of your mistakes, and you are forgiven. I can learn that about the failure of people. We can learn that. We can learn how that works. I feel sorry for people who get drunk. I want to help people who get drunk. I want to help people who have drug addictions. I want to help people. I don't want to condemn them. I don't want to feel superior to them. Just because I don't have an alcohol problem and just because I don't have a drug problem doesn't mean that I'm superior to those people. Because like everyone, I'm a sinner as well. I may not have your specific sin, but I am a sinner just like you are a sinner. And so thereby, David committed adultery. Does that mean we can all have one time in our life we commit adultery? He suffered consequences for it, and he murdered to cover up. Friends, we can learn from these things. We can learn from the mistakes of others. We can learn that it can happen to us, and that if it does happen to us, God forbid, if it happens to us, we can have forgiveness and mercy. We can learn from the mistakes of other people, the experience of other people. So I had you turn to 1 Corinthians 10, verses 6 through 11. Here's Paul talking about learning from mistakes of the people in the Old Testament. These things became our examples to the intent that we should not lust after other things. So we try not to lust. Verse 7, we try not to become idolaters, like the ones over in Exodus 32. We don't want to be sexually immoral, as they did back then, and 23,000 people were killed. We don't want to be tempting Christ, because in the Old Testament, when they tempted Christ, they were destroyed by serpents. We don't want to be complainers and murmurers, because the example is if you're complainers and murmurers, that God's not happy with that. Verse 11 says, all these things that happen as examples. They were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the age have come. My friends, we talked about learning from the success of the Son of God and success of God himself, but we can also learn from the mistakes of other people. We read in the Bible they made their mistakes. We don't want to imitate that. You have dear friends in your family, you have dear friends in your church, you have dear friends in fellow churches, you have dear friends in your neighborhood who sin and make mistakes, and you learn from it. You try to help them, but you learn from it. Now, the third point is learning from our own mistakes and sins. The second point was learning from the mistakes of others, but we learn from our own. Let's look at Luke chapter 15, the prodigal son. Luke chapter 15. See, as we said, you and I may not have an alcohol problem, but we may have friends who do. You and I may not have a drug problem, but we have friends who do. You and I may never have committed adultery, but we know people who have. You and I may have never killed anybody, but we know people who have. But sooner or later, if we start listing sins, sooner or later, we're all going to be in that list. We haven't done all these sins, but we've done our own. We've done our share. And hopefully we can learn from the mistake of the prodigal son. You know the prodigal son, Luke 15, verse 11. A certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, I want my portion now. I want my inheritance now. I don't want to wait till you die. I want it now because I need to buy this. I need to do that. I need it now." So the dad could have said, "No, you're going to wait till I pass. It's going to be passed on to you then." Or, "You're going to wait till you're a certain age." I don't know what age the prodigal son was. Maybe there's some history on that. I don't know what the history is. But I mean, even like there's some things in wills, when we do our will, for like some of our grandchildren, we may not give it to them when they're, 18 or 15. We can direct when they get the money. We can direct even how they get the money. But this dad said, "Okay, I'll give it to you right now." Well, the younger son gathered his things and left. He wanted to get away from home. I got to get away from dad. I got to get away from dad's rules. I got to get away from mom. Unfortunately, he wasted all his possessions with prodigal living. And he spent all, and a famine came in the land, and he was hungry, he was cold. He didn't have a great way to survive. So he found a citizen who had animals, and he slept with the pigs. He was out there with the pigs, feeding the pigs. That was his job. And he thought about how he would have gladly eaten what the pigs ate, but they wouldn't give him anything. Well, then verse 17 is when he thought, I could be at home in the house, or I can be in the workers' quarters. I could be where the workers are. It's a nice bed, but it's not as good as the house. They eat well, but it's not as good as mom's food. Oh, my father's hired servants have bread to eat, and they're not hungry. I think I should go to my father and tell him, "Dad, I was wrong. I sinned against God, and Dad, I even sinned against you. I went against God's expectations, Dad, and I went against your expectations, and even though I'm not worthy to be called the son, can I at least be like the hired hands? Can I have a job? Can I have a bed? Can I have their food? I don't expect to be in the house. I don't expect to get everything handed to me on a silver platter, but can I at least just be there?" That's what he was thinking. So he rose and he came to his father. And when his father saw him, his father ran and hugged him because his dad missed him. Point I like to make on this every time I talk about this: his dad forgave him even before the son said he was sorry. He forgave him even before the son said he was sorry. He loved his boy. He ran and hugged his neck and kissed him. Then the son said, "Dad, I've sinned against heaven. I'm not worthy to be called your son." And Dad said, "Forget about it, boy. Bring out the best robe. Put the ring on his hand, the sandals on his feet. Bring the best calf. Bring the best meat. We're gonna have a celebration. My son is home. My son is alive. I didn't know if he was dead or not. He's home." And they began to make merry. See, we can learn from that, friends. What can we learn from that when we learn from our own mistakes? Well, we can learn, don't be stupid. Obeying God is smart. Even though there is mercy, and thank God for his mercy, and yes, I'll take the mercy, but really, do I want to use the mercy? Or do I want to use the obedience and blessing? Do we want to make every mistake in the book? No. Do we want to try drugs to then receive mercy? That's like when Paul said, should we continue, because grace abounds, should we continue in sin? Are you nuts? Because you can be forgiven for going to prison. Do you want to go to prison? Because you can be forgiven for abusing your body through prostitution, do you want to be a prostitute? No way. That cheap grace argument just doesn't make any sense at all. Yes, we're forgiven. God's way's smart. God's way's good. We can learn from mistakes. We can learn from our own mistakes. The next point, we can learn from our success. We can learn from our success. And I want to spend a little time on this. And there was a reason why I started with success, failure, failure, success. Because I wanted to get us started thinking about being successful. And I wanted to end with us being successful. But along the line, we're going to learn, watch people make mistakes, and we're going to learn from the mistakes of others. And we can learn from our own mistakes, and please, let us learn from our mistakes. But successful, here's what we want. I want to look at the older brother of the prodigal son. Here in chapter 15, verse 25. The older son. The older son was in the field, and he came and he heard the music. What's going on? Music? Dancing? What's going on? So he called one of his servants and said, what is the business over there? And the servant said, your brother has come back. And because he has received him safe and sound, your father had killed the fatted calf. Well, the brother, unfortunately, didn't have the right response. And maybe you've had this response, but I think most of the time you have not had this response. I think most of the time you've been happy when people have changed, when people have grown. And that's why I say you can learn from your success. But this boy was angry. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him, come on in, come join the party. And the boy's response was, all these years, I've been serving you. I didn't run away. I didn't sleep with pigs. I didn't even ask for my inheritance. So therefore I didn't spend my inheritance. I've been serving you. Every instruction you gave me, I followed all your instructions. You didn't give me even a young goat. You didn't have a party like this to make merry with a young goat. But as soon as my brother comes, he spent all his money. He slept with harlots. And you give him a party. You make a big celebration. I ask this because that would be a mistake if you've ever made that mistake. But I think most of you have not made that mistake. Most of you have not been condemning other people who screw up and mess up. Most of you get focused in on you wanting to please the Father with conviction. And most of the time, not only do we want the conviction, we are learning to have the compassion for others. Instead of laughing and mocking, we look at our brother like this and say, why are you doing this? Don't you realize God's way works? Don't you realize God's way is a blessing? And that's what I say about even different denominations when they do something different than you. I don't think you're looking down your nose at them. Well, they believe this. Maybe you did at one point think that way. I think most of you are thinking, they're doing the best they can. They're doing things based on what they know to do. And what can I learn from them? What can I see them doing that help me? So I think that's the kind of success we want. I want you to turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 8. The reason I say that, to me, religion, for most people, and since we want to be religious, although we really want to be spiritual, most people make a list of things that they have to do to make themselves feel good about themselves. And then they have a list of the opposite, that they look at other people and say they're bad people. There's so much judging in religion, it's despicable. And the thing is, that's not what spiritual living is like. That's not what God's instruction is like. So again, we don't want to be ever looking down our nose at people who do things differently. We want to help them if we can help them, but we don't want to hurt. We don't want to be a part of hurting them. Look at Deuteronomy 8, verses 10 through 17. Here's where you've been successful, friends. Here's where you've been successful. When you have eaten and are full, then you bless the Lord your God, which has given you. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, his statutes, which I command you today, lest you are eaten and full and built beautiful houses and dwell in them. When you have herds and flocks, multiply your silver and gold multiplied, and they are multiplied. when your heart is lifted up and you forget the Lord your God. I'm telling you, friends, you have been successful, because even though when life is good for you, you're not taking credit for it. When life is good for you, you're giving the credit to God, because you know a trial can come at any moment. So you're giving credit to God, because the warning was, don't, like in verse 17, the problem is that they said, my power has done this. I have gained this wealth. I have gained this blessing. Friends, I know you make mistakes, because I do too. But I'm telling you, your success, friends, you are not giving yourself the credit. You are people who are giving God the credit, and we want to continue doing that. Let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 17. And I want to give a whole sermon on this one sometime. This is one that I apply to myself all the time as a daily reminder. It's kind of like, I'll use a football analogy. I was going to use a New Orleans Saints analogy, but I got to pick a good team. That's a shot for Clay. He doesn't come here very often. I got to get a shot at. Now, I just said that. It doesn't matter what team. But life is like a defensive back. A defensive back has to have a bad memory, because you get out there and you play this guy, and if you make a good play and get the big hit, they throw at you again, and if you don't make the play the next time, they score a touchdown on you. Or if you make a great play, either way, if you make a great play or a bad play, you have to forget it. If you make a mistake, you've got to move on. If you have success, you've got to move on. That's the beauty of life, is we have to move on. We can't be sitting back. People, I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but especially when I travel, I get a lot of compliments on my presentations. Okay, I know you find it hard to believe, but the only thing that matters is the next presentation. Every presentation I gave in the past that was bad is gone. Every presentation I gave in the past that was good is gone. The only thing that matters is the next presentation. It's like a defensive back. You can't think about the great plays, you can't think about the mistakes, you just focus on the next one. So having said this, I love this verse here that I want to remember every day of my life for me. And I know instead of you judging me about this, I would recommend you look at this for you. 1 Samuel 15:17 says, Samuel said, when you were little in your own eyes, were you not made the head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? My friends, whenever we've had success in life, it's when we were little in our own eyes and we gave the credit to God and let God use us. And then whenever we get too big for our britches, we invite disaster, we invite trouble. So that's why, before I give a presentation, I try to do it all the time, and obviously some days I do a better job than others. But I know I need this, and so I'm reminding you that so do you. I need to stay little in my own eyes and remember who gets the credit. Because when I do that, then there's success. I want to help people. I love helping people. And I will help people if I follow the scripture. And so will you, my friends. You will help people when you follow the scripture. But the thing is, friends, most of the time we remember this. That's why you do help people. That's why people come counsel you. That's why people talk to you. That's why people ask you to pray for them. Because not that think we're something special and turn people off. We realize our spot. In the plan of God, we realize our spot. God is the great healer. God is the great Savior. God is the one who helps. We point people to Him. We'll pray for people. We'll hold their hand. We'll help them. But friends, you do a good job of staying little in your own eyes. And so remember that. Remember that, because that's when things go well for us. Galatians 6:1, a couple quick verses here. I'm going to talk about your success now. We talked about the success of other people. We talked about the mistakes of other people. We talked about our own mistakes. And this fourth point is learning from our own success. Galatians 6:1. Do you remember all the times you've done this well? You've done this well a lot. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness. Remember all the times you've seen people make mistakes. Instead of condemning them, instead of gossiping about them, remember how you went to talk to them, you prayed for them, and even if you were tempted to be bold, and even if you were tempted to be rude, and even if you were tempted to be self-righteous, you tried to restore them with a spirit of gentleness, realizing that you can't judge them harshly because they could turn around and judge you harshly. I can't judge you harshly because you could turn around and judge me harshly. But brother, I'm trying to remind you of the good things you do to learn from this. Remember the good feelings of doing it the right way. Remember the great results of doing it the right way. I want to conclude this section over in James chapter 1. Again, reminding of your success. James 1, verses 22 through 27. James said, be doers of the word. You remember how you're seeking to do that? Remember when you made a decision that you were not going to be here only, but you wanted, because you realized you can fool yourself, you can lie to yourself. Remember when you used to lie to yourself, but now you're trying to be a doer? Remember when you were a hearer of the word only? Remember when you weren't a doer? But now that you are a doer, you look into the perfect law as a mirror. Remember, there was a time you used to just look and forget. But now, verse 25, now you're looking into the perfect law of liberty and you're wanting to follow God. You're not forgetful anymore, but you're trying to be a doer of good works, a doer of God's instructions, doer of God's expectations, because you know God will bless you for it, and God does bless you for it, and He can use you to bless other people. There was a time when we used to think, we thought we were religious, but we remembered we didn't bridle our tongue. And so when we realized if we didn't bridle our tongue, we were deceiving ourselves and our religion was useless. But friends, your religion is no longer useless because you are bridling your tongues. You are having a right approach toward God. You're having a right approach to other people. My friends, you are practicing pure and undefiled religion before God the Father. My friends, you visit the orphans. My friends, you help the widows. My friends, you look at God's expectations and you say, you do not want to take the spots of sin in your life. See, what I'm trying to help you realize, friends, even though studying is important, it's what we do that matters, and you're doing a lot of things. So you, my friends, I wanted to remind you today about these lessons you can learn. Success, failure, failure, success. My friends, learn from the success of other people. Find those good role models. Study those good role models. Imitate those good role models. My friends, when you see the mistakes of everybody, even good people, you want to learn from those mistakes. It can happen to you. It can happen to me. It happened to Noah. It happened to David. It happened to everyone except Christ. And then we can learn from our own mistakes. We can learn that, yes, we're capable of being really stupid. We're capable of doing something really foolish. But God is loving, and if we can get restored with Him, we can take on His instructions again, and we can be successful. And again, remember the times you have been successful. Remember the times you have been little in your own eyes. Remember the times you have been helping people in the spirit of meekness. Remember the times when you've been a doer, not just a hearer. Remember times you've been controlling your tongue. So again, I just wanted to give you some points about helping you to learn from experience. Learn from the success of other people. Learn from the mistakes and sins of other people. Learn from your own mistakes and sins. And more importantly, learn from your own success. God is with you, and God will continue to help you be successful.